All right. Well, welcome to this afternoon's webinar, Resource Rich Feedback. My name is Richard Smith, and I'm going to be your host for this session, which will be presented by Dr. Darcy Harlan, who is a contributing member of the Richard Riley College of Education and Leadership, and Amber Cook, who is the Associate Director of Faculty Outreach and Support with the Writing Center. Before we get started, I want to do some general housekeeping. And even before that, you'll notice in the chat area here on the left-hand side of the screen, I have noted that I am coming from Houston, Texas. I'm in Houston, Texas. That's me, Center for Faculty Excellence. And Darcy is calling in from Arizona. So why don't all of you put in where you are located and also let us know what program you are associated with. In the meantime, I'll get on with this general orientation. If you notice the outline here, this area outlined in looks like yellow on my screen, this is the area where where you will see most of the written presentation, which in essence is the PowerPoint presentation. And the presenters will go over the information with you as the presentation continues. We also have the area for the chat area into which you are all entering information now, so you're familiar with that. We have an area above that which is used by our captioneer, who is recording everything that is written, that is said in this presentation, and using, turning it into a text recording. Now, always up here, you'll notice this little tiny icon that's outlined now in yellow. That gives you the ability to raise your hand and indicate whether you agree or disagree with something that the presenter has said, and the presenter might ask you if you want to agree or disagree or raise your hand. After you raise your hand, be sure and lower your hand so that we can have clear information for the rest of the class to enter. This area over here, outlined in yellow, is the help button. If you click that, you're going to get help for, that comes from Adobe Connect. In most instances, if the help it gives you is not going to be specific to your problem. So if you are having a problem, enter that information into the chat area, and I'll monitor that. If I see a solution, I will let you know as soon as possible. And now we're ready for our presentation, and starting with the presentation will be Darcy Harlan. Darcy, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad that you all could take time out of your busy schedules to come to our session today. I'm going to go ahead. The goals here, we have three main goals. And the first is that you will be able to find Writing Center resources on writing issues that your students have. My guess is that you have dabbled in the wonderful resources that our Writing Center has, but I'm sure there's things that you don't know about, and so we would like to help you learn about those. Our second goal is that we want to help you construct reusable text for student feedback on student writing. Reusable meaning, is there something that you say and you feel like you say it all the time over and over and over again? We want to help you find a way to speed up your feedback to students. And so that leads into our third goal, which is using text expander tools in Word to speed up grading. So essentially, we're going to go from this, which would be, there's a paper, and this session is built on the premise that you probably use insert comments feature in Word. And so maybe you insert a comment like work on paragraph organization. And we're suggesting that that's probably not specific enough and that students might not be able to act and improve their writing based on that feedback. So we're hoping that maybe something more along this line will be more effective, where you identify a problem, tell them how to fix it, and then provide them with a link to the Walden Writing Center. So I'm going to turn it over now to Amber.
Thanks, Darcy. So we want to start by kind of getting some feedback from you all about what you're seeing in your students' papers. And I'm assuming that you're seeing something. That's why you signed up for this session. And I want you to think about it in two ways. And we're going to have a whiteboard up here in just a second so you can enter your responses. There's two sort of occupying forces when we talk about student writing issues. One is what you would consider the most problematic writing issues that you see in student papers, or if you're someone who supervises faculty, maybe these are the issues that you hear most often from your faculty, and then also your particular writing pet peeves. And that's something that I want everyone to think about, that I know, you know, from hearing students talk about it and from seeing faculty feedback, that we all have, you know, one or two issues that just drive us nuts, whether or not they're the actually most important or critical writing issues that you see in student papers. So I think that's something to be aware of as we go into this conversation. You know, what are you seeing the most that's actually the most problematic and really getting in the student's way? And then what are your particular pet peeves? So Richard, if you could pull the text, the whiteboard over so everyone can enter their feedback, that would be great.
Okay, can you see the whiteboard?
I sure do.
Okay.
And so to enter your feedback, everyone, if you could just click on that letter T, that will give you a text box, and you just drag it on the screen and then type in either one of those answers to that prompt, which would be issues that you're seeing with your students writing, and then also pet peeves. Yeah, too much passive voice. Hiding the thesis. Well, shame on them. They don't hide the thesis.
Passive came up twice already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Citing APA, grammar, spelling. Oh, you want clear, simple, logical writing. Got it. Okay.
Someone agrees.
Oh, thanks for the humor, everyone. This really does help. No headings. Yes, I noticed that as well.
All right, we'll give it maybe another 10 seconds to see if anyone has anything else to add before we move it along.
As far as pet peeves, I'm going to add one, and that's, I don't like the word things. In my world, if you're saying the word things, there's another noun you should be using.
That's how I feel about utilize.
Oh yeah, utilize. Mm-hmm.
Utilize is a great word for when used to actually mean utilize, but people use it as a synonym for used, and that's my pet peeve. Yeah. Certainly not the most important issue in a paper, but it's what catches my eye. So students list references but fail to include in-text citations. I see that a lot, and I've taught a few courses, and I see that especially in discussion posts, that they'll just throw in a reference list at the end but haven't actually integrated any citations.
Yeah.
Okay, well this is really helpful. Richard, if you could go ahead and remove this for now, and we'll be coming back to this for an activity we have a little bit later down the road. But I think this is a helpful place to start, to think about what you're tending to see in student papers and what's kind of getting in the way of these students being successful in their writing. So where we're going to start with this conversation, I'm going to go through at a fairly quick clip some of the Writing Center resources that can be useful for this type of feedback. I mean, we know we've got a lot of Writing Center resources that are useful when making referrals, but we're trying to think about specifically feedback you can use in when you actually create feedback on your papers. So sometimes that's a little bit different than making referrals to the Writing Center. This first slide, obviously it's sort of one and the same. So paper reviews, those are our most kind of popular, most well-known services that we have for students. And for those who may not know, we do have quite a lot more availability than we used to have for these paper reviews. So if you remember the days of last summer and before, where students might have 2 weeks to wait before they got one of the precious openings that were available in our schedule, that's not the paradigm we have anymore. We now have availability most days. So if you signed on today, you would find slots available today. And it's been a long time since we've been able to say that, but we have quite a few more staff now. And so paper reviews are now something that you can recommend without worrying that the student is going to come back to you and say, but there's no spots. I've included at the bottom of this slide, you'll see in the kind of yellow box, here's an example of how you might cut and paste some feedback into your own feedback about paper reviews. For helpful feedback on your writing and any patterns of errors you may have, make an appointment for a paper review with the Writing Center, and then it's got the link right there. So that's something you could just have as a standard recommendation in your classroom for students who seem like they could benefit from a more extensive writing review. And notice that there's not a lot of negativity here. There's not the, you really need a lot of, you're struggling with your writing, you really need a lot of help. Something we struggle against in the Writing Center is people thinking that the Writing Center is just for students who are really struggling, just for remediation, a punishment of some kind, and that's really not what the Writing Center is about. We see students who are very strong writers who just want a reader response to their work, and we see students who are really having trouble with basic syntax. We really see it all, and we want the feedback that you provide about paper reviews to reflect that. We have quite a bit of Q&A support as well. So you'll see there's several different types. At the top, you'll see our email addresses. One for, the top one is for sort of writing APA Writing Center issues. And that second one, editor@waldenu.edu, is for students who are working on their doctoral capstones. And that's responses by an actual staff member at the Writing Center, and we respond within 24 hours. Quick answers, which I'll show you a little bit later. If you haven't used it yet, this is a really fantastic service that students can use, which works a whole lot like Google Answers, where a student types in a question and then there's pre-populated answers to the most commonly asked questions. This has really reduced the kind of traffic we have in that first bullet with all of the email addresses and allowed us to spend that time on more specific questions, not kind of answering those same questions over and over. This is also a good spot to find some language that you might want to use in some of your kind of auto feedback that we'll talk about later. And you'll see, again, some wording there that you could potentially borrow. We do have a series of self-paced modules. This is something that we've had a lot of good faculty feedback about. What these are 3 sets of tutorials that are put together by the Writing Center staff. They begin with a pre-module quiz that the students take to get a feel for where they need help, where they need to do a little bit more study. And then there's a series of tutorials which are pulled from our other resources. So we didn't create a lot of new material. We just took blog posts and short videos and web posts that will really help a student kind of acquire the knowledge that's missing as identified by their pre-module quiz. And it's a way to get it in a variety of resources. So they're not just reading and reading, reading. They're also seeing videos and listening to instruction, and then seeing the more casual instruction of our blog posts. And all of those are combined to do kind of a larger education around a specific topic. They take a quiz afterwards, and then if they pass that quiz, they receive a certificate of completion. So I know a lot of faculty members like that because they sort of need a way to verify that a student has followed through on a referral. If you point your students to these modules, they'll have a way to say, yes, I took the plagiarism module as you recommended, and here's my certificate of completion. So it can be a really handy way to have that kind of dialogue that you sometimes need with students about whether they're following through. Grammarly, as you all probably know, it's a really, really popular service. I have kind of a love-hate relationship with it. What it is an automated sort of error detection system. So it works much like Microsoft Word's grammar and spell check, but in addition to identifying errors, it also provides some feedback. So as you'll see on this screenshot, they identified some passive voice, and then there's a description of what passive voice is. Here's what passive voice is, here's how to fix it. And then on that right-hand column, you'll see it also calculates the number of errors that are like that. So in this particular person's writing, they had 6 or 8, I can't read that small a letter, instances of passive voice. And then you'll see all the other types of errors kind of enumerated there, which can be helpful for students. It's not ideal for everyone. If students have severe syntax problems, sometimes Grammarly just short circuits and doesn't know what to do with it and just skips that sentence altogether, which can be a problem. But for students who have a handful of written errors, somebody mentioned on the whiteboard earlier, grammar and spelling issues, that's perfect for Grammarly. We really don't need a human reviewer going through and telling somebody that they spelled a word wrong, but Grammarly can do that fairly succinctly. Again, here in that yellow box, you'll see an example of how you might talk about Grammarly, to sort of point out that it's a free service, to point out that it's something that students can check by themselves. This works really well for students who are kind of intimidated by the idea of submitting a paper to an actual writing tutor through the paper review service. That might sound scary to them, but Grammarly is very anonymous. They don't have to worry about anybody sort of judging them if they're concerned that that's going to be an issue, which it isn't, but we know that that's one of the concerns. We do have a series of writing skill webinars, and those can also be handy for making referrals for students. They tend to be about an hour long, same kind of format as these sorts of webinars. And you'll see on that right-hand screenshot that there are categories there. So we have some that are specific to undergraduate students, to graduate students, a certain set of grammar webinars, APA webinars, and you can kind of scroll through there and see the ones that might be the best fit for your students. So just like you don't want to say to your students, go to the Writing Center, you probably also don't want to say, go watch a webinar, because if they hit our archive, that's a lot. But if you can really kind of single out some that you think are especially helpful, and if you need help with that too, I'm happy to give you some advice on some that I think are good starts for students at certain phases or exhibiting certain writing skill deficits. And there's also a live series of webinars too that schedules on the left-hand side, and you'll see that on some of those same links. Students and faculty can subscribe to a weekly newsletter that lets you know which webinars are coming up in a given week, and that's handy too if you don't want to try to kind of keep up with it yourself, or if you follow the Writing Center on Facebook, you'll get updates about that as well. Our website, and I'll go through this in a little bit to sort of show you how our website is organized. There is quite a bit of information on our website. Probably the top comment we get about our web materials is that there's so much, and there really is so much. That's because we've tried to develop as much Walden-specific instruction as we can. So we try to, for instance, our APA examples, we try to use examples that a Walden student might actually need, and think about ways to really make the instruction targeted to the kind of students that we know we have and the kind of students that we see come in for paper reviews. Two ways to navigate that better. If you look at that left-hand screenshot, you'll see the red arrow points to the way it's sort of organized. So within each topic, there are subtopics that the left-hand column sort of serves as a table of contents. And this is how all of the student-facing websites look these days. So the library website's organized this way, career services, student support. So really this navigation should be somewhat familiar to students, but might be less familiar to you as faculty. My best recommendation is to use the search box at the top right of the Writing Center website, and that way if you're looking for instruction on a certain topic, and we'll talk about this in just a minute, you can just type that in that search box, and then it'll pull up for you all of the blog posts, all of the webinars, all of the website instruction on that particular topic. So that's another good way to, if you're looking to populate your auto text, that's a really good way to start, is if you sort of take, here are the 6 or 7 things I say over and over, type those into that search box, and you'll get some good links to use in your feedback. Blog posts as well. We do have a list that pairs specific student writing skill problems with blog posts and podcasts, and that can be handy again for students who are a little weary of reading, academic text. The podcasts are all audio, and they can, listen to that while they're washing their dishes or on a jog. And then the blog posts are very personal. We have different authors for those, and they tend to be a lot more casual, more first person, more just really targeted information about things that really tend to confound Walden students. And we've got a list that pairs that, each writing skill with a good link or two to those blog posts and podcasts. And all of these appear in the actual slides. So you'll probably, Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, but receive access to these slides after the session. And if you don't,
yes,
feel free to.
Everybody will receive a copy of everything that was presented when the session ends, within a day or so.
Thank you, Richard. So a lot of these, if you click on the actual screenshots, then you'll be taken to the site. So I know I'm describing a lot of material here, but you will have access to those after the fact. Templates are a really handy resource, and it's one of those things that once students discover them, they tend to use them for every assignment they have. What these are downloadable Microsoft Word documents that students can use that are already pre-formatted in APA layout. So the margins are APA compliant, spacing, page breaks, section breaks if needed, the headers, everything looks as it should in APA. So if the students download this and just type directly into it as their base document, then they don't have to struggle with all of those kind of word formatting details that are required by APA. We've got some that are general, that just sort of an APA generic paper, and then they go on to have some that are program specific. Some programs have specific ways they want the title page to look, or some differences in the way they approach introductions or whatever it might be. So those are also housed there. This is something that, if you've got a student who's really spending a lot of time, creating their running head or doing those formatting details, which is really not where you want them spending most of their energy, the templates are a lifesaver. Wanted to mention too, for those of you who work with dissertation writers or doc study, project study writers, we do have quite a few resources on those as well. I won't go through each of these, but do notice that there's quite a few resources, some from the Writing Center, some from Academic Skills, depending on the kinds of work that the student needs to have done. Most of the resources we have at the Writing Center work just as well for these students. Paper reviews are not available to dissertation writers. It's just not a good fit. Those are 30-minute kind of developmental based instruction, and that's not usually the best fit for students who are writing pages and pages and pages and are just looking to kind of move toward finishing. Instruction is really not what they want more editing. So we've got more resources for students at that phase. I want to point out specifically the capstone writing community. I know a lot of you probably have worked with students who find that the dissertation phase is a really isolating phase of their work, and they need some way to connect with other people who are also going through it. The capstone writing community is a really handy resource for that. They also have a lot of access to the dissertation editors through that forum, so they can ask questions. They have live reviews, so they'll actually take a student's paper who's volunteered for this, and they'll do a live form and style review so students can see this is what the editors are looking for, this is what that final stage is going to look like. So just something to kind of plug there. It's something that can be really handy if you've got a student who seems like they're really struggling with that isolation piece. A lot of what I've just discussed, we do have already kind of written up. So again, if you're looking to create a database of your own feedback, a good place to start is this link of classroom announcements. And this is not comprehensive, but it is a way, if you just say, I really like my student to use Grammarly, but it's going to take you 15 minutes to look up the link and find some good wording. We want to save you that time. So this is on the Writing Center Toolbox for Faculty, which is our faculty-facing web space. And there's a series of classroom announcements that you can use there. So it's a good place to start. Again, if you just want to, kind of load that over to your own feedback bank, it's a good start for a lot of the recommendations that we're talking about here in these slides. Okay, so given that whirlwind tour that I just did of the Writing Center, one thing that I want you all to think about is when you start creating your own feedback bank, or if you've already got one and you're looking to kind of beef it up, to think about some of those most common resources. And I won't pull that whiteboard back up, but you kind of remember what kept coming up, some of the themes, lack of thesis, problems with APA citation, grammar and spelling. You can probably think of a lot of those sorts of topics that come up consistently for you, and especially in your course. There might even be content feedback that you give constantly. In the WCSS courses I teach, there are always one or two things that pop up no matter what in a certain assignment because of the way the assignment's written, or because I know that's something that they're going to struggle with. And I'm going to have some kind of pre-populated feedback for that. So let's think about a little bit. We probably won't do this as a group, but think about what we've got here. So there's academic guides or the website material, there's blog posts, there are modules, podcasts, archived webinars. If you want to find some of these to correspond to what you see, I'm going to share my screen for just a minute so you can see kind of how I would do this. Here is the Writing Center website, and you can get to it just by going to writingcenter.waldenu.edu. The longer address is up here as well. And you can see it's designed to be somewhat navigable, using these columns up at the top and using these areas over here on the left. So under Writing Help, you've got all the different services that I just described, paper reviews, modules. We've got a series of resources for multilingual students, and then here by topic. So grammar, scholarly writing, this details things like, under Common Course assignments, we talk about annotated bibliographies or literature reviews, those sorts of things, and anything else about kind of writing at the doctoral level. APA, of course, and then this is more of our, specific to the Writing Center. that can be a little bit overwhelming. So if we take something like something that came up on the whiteboard was APA citations. I'm going to type that in here. APA citations, I'm going to search, and it will pull up all of the resources we have. So here it pulled up some of our instruction from our website, more citing, and then it's got these labels for website if you want to just see blog posts, so you know your students might respond better to something that's a little bit more personal. Here we've got, demystifying in-text versus parenthetical citations. And here's one I wrote on citing an author throughout a paragraph. As some of you know, that's a tricky concept. How often should I cite? Matt wrote that. So there's ways to kind of pull in those resources quickly. Another way to do this is to go to quick answers. So if I type in quick answers, which is also on this homepage, APA citations, you'll start to see all of these questions that populate. How do I cite using APA? How do I cite personal communications in APA? Course DVD or webcast? And you kind of really get that long list of resources that are already put together. So let me pick one at random. How do I cite a course DVD or webcast? And you've got an answer here. And you'll notice that there's an answer and then also additional resources that kind of relate to that answer. And then also at the bottom, there's always an area for further questions. So if you didn't quite get the answer you needed, you've got an email address that you can use. So that's just something that you can use as well for your own purposes or for identifying work for students. All right, so I'm going to go back here. And I'm going to hand things back to Darcy.
Okay, thanks, Amber. So I have a tendency to stalk the Writing Center. They know me there just because I like to reply to the blog posts, which are now up and running again, and just really like the services that they provide. Anytime I think of, man, students are having trouble with this, I go to the Writing Center and they've already got something on it. So I love this comic, and how we deliver feedback is important. So the instructor is saying to the students, your work output leaves a lot to be desired. And the student says, what? In what way specifically? And the professor says, it's really hard to say, really. Generally, I would give it a frowny face. And the student says, your feedback is an emoticon. So obviously that's not the kind of feedback that we want to be giving our students. And that is what I would like to talk about next. How we bring that feedback to the student. So let's first talk about what is feedback. What it is not is advice. Sentences that start with you need to, you might want to, you should have. That's coming across as advice, and that's not technically what feedback should be. It's also not an evaluation. Good job, or this is a weak paper, or the writing is too wordy. Although our job is to evaluate student writing, the feedback specifically to certain sentences need to be more targeted. So what is feedback? Well, it's actionable. It describes the data. This paragraph does not have a topic sentence. It's not something you can argue with. It's a statement. It's very clear. And so that is one very important aspect of what feedback is. Feedback is also user-friendly. It focuses on one outcome. So, for example, the Writing Center has a blog post titled Create Flow in Your Writing that will help improve flow between paraphrased ideas in your analysis. It's very specific to one targeted writing issue, and it also has a link to the Writing Center. And so students will know how to act on that feedback that you're giving them. Amber, this is your slide.
Thanks, Darcy.
What
this is something I just
say
really love.
Behind your...
This is my favorite title that I've ever come up with. What this is a webinar that I put together, or actually it was a faculty meeting presentation a couple summers ago, where I kind of polled loosely feedback that we'd gotten from students about their faculty's feedback. And we always hope, of course, that they're going straight to their faculty with this, but in some cases they're a little intimidated, they come straight to us. And these are the themes that I just wanted to point out as we're kind of talking about developing your feedback and practices to think about. One complaint we get a lot is that the faculty member only makes notes about APA and they don't comment on content. They don't comment on ideas or whether the student has the right idea on the actual research or the content mastery that they're supposed to be giving. And I know that's very tempting and very hard to ignore, but it is something that comes up a lot. Sometimes they'll say that they're pretty sure that their faculty member is wrong about something, but they don't know how to say it. Maybe the faculty member has advocated a 5th edition format for something and they know that it should be 6th edition, but they're not comfortable saying so to the faculty member. So creating some sort of way for your students to communicate that to you is always key. And most of us have, you know, 1 or 2 things that we're hanging on to that aren't necessarily correct. So if you've got that student who really is on the ball, you want to make sure they've got a way to let you know. Often they don't know what's going on. They'll get feedback and they're not really sure what it means, and for whatever reason they're intimidated to go to you for clarity, so they come to us for that same clarity. So again, creating that pathway can be helpful there. And then this last one you've probably heard before. Again, if you're at this workshop, this is probably something you've thought about. This faculty member is a lot pickier than the last one was. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's just that issue of pet peeves, though. You might be a faculty member who just sort of thinks title page, title page, I don't really care exactly how that looks. But the next person down the road really, really cares about exactly how many spaces down from the top that first title is, or, you know, whatever it might be. And then also sometimes they, you know, have that idea that if the faculty member didn't mention something, then it must be correct. And most of us know that when you're providing feedback, you tend to be using a little bit of a triage approach where you're not necessarily hitting every single thing that's wrong. You're just saying right now, the biggest bleeder is the student's ability to not plagiarize. So we're going to focus on that. Right now, I'm not going to worry about thesis statement or transitions or that kind of thing. So then if they fix that and then the next class comes around, then they're seeing a little bit more what they might interpret as pickiness. So these are just things to keep in mind.
Now, I think that is so true what you just said. We can't comment on everything or they would never take the next class. I mean, you can only do what you can at the moment that you have the student. And you have to pick and select what it is you want to target. And so that really does segue well into what I want to talk about next, which is what it is you say to students in that comment box. And what I am suggesting is that you just very carefully describe the problem, you describe the data, and then you connect them to a resource. So I'd like to pause here for a second and just ask you to raise your hand if you have taught classes of students who are at their first or second quarter or semester at Walden. Take a second, go up and use that icon where the person's hand is raised. Raise your hand if you teach new Walden students. Okay, can I just say, Megan, Mary, Tom, John, thank you. I've been teaching at Walden for years now and only taught the advanced level courses, and I taught my first introductory course, and I was absolutely amazed at how poor their writing was, and it gave me a huge appreciation for those faculty who spend the time to give the feedback to students that allow them to become good writers. And so by the time I got them in the advanced courses, I can concentrate on ideas and deep thinking. And so thank you for those of you who do that and take the time to provide that feedback to students. So I'm sure we've all had a paper where it's just so bad, you don't even know where to begin. And you're just like, oh, it's just bad. And so what I'm saying is we have to focus. You have to narrow the problem and decide on one thing that you want them to work on. So maybe you're seeing a lack of paragraph organization, but that could be broken down into lots of different things and issues that you could ask them to work on. I'm saying just pick one. Just say, okay, let's just talk about topic sentences and just comment on that. So here is where you would do what Amber showed you to do, is go to the Walden Writing Center and either in their search box or in that questions area, type in a topic. And so I did that for topic sentence, and I got responses for the academic guides at the blog, and then webinars and also podcasts. And then I also would just pick one. You don't want to overwhelm the students, so pick the one that's best for what you think the student may use. Okay, now I want to talk about how you write the words that you want students to read about their feedback. First, you describe the problem, suggest how to fix it, and then you include a URL. So here are some examples. The first one is, this sentence uses too much edu-lingo and the words are getting in the way of the ideas you want to communicate. While doctoral thinking needs to be complex, the words used to describe the ideas do not. And then I link it to the Keep It Super Simple blog post. Here's another example. This is an example of an anthropomorphism. Theories, concepts paper sections and literature reviews can't do anything. Work on rephrasing this. See this blog post. And this one, for about a year, was like my big thing. I wanted all my students to know what an anthropomorphism was. Here's another one. This sentence has more words than necessary. Work on improving your economy of expression by reducing wordiness, avoiding redundancy, and paying attention to the length of your sentences. Grammarly can help you do this. See the Walden Writing Center link. And in this one, it is kind of long, and what I would do is, this is the text that I have Word auto-populate for me, but then I would go in and pick the one I want them to work on. Was it wordiness, redundancy, or length of the sentence? And so I can delete out what I want, but I have Word give me that so that I can edit it quickly. Okay, what I'd like to do now is have you, based on what I just said, help me fix these. So in the chat area, if you would, take a look at this comment that says missing a thesis statement, and it has a link. What could we do to improve this comment? Anybody have any ideas what we could do to improve this comment? Right now it's got a sentence and a link. What's it missing? I can see some of you are writing. Yeah, just saying it's missing a thesis statement might not be enough. It's possible the student doesn't know what a thesis statement is. Explaining that may be helpful. Thanks, Mary. Yes, tone is important, and being able to come across like you really are trying to help the student, not just cramming stuff down their throat, is important. Very good. That's true, Megan. Thank you. Jennifer, you too. It's difficult to determine what is necessary without more context. It's not enough for the student necessarily to act on. What are they supposed to do is kind of missing. Good. Looks like you guys got the hang of this. Okay, let's do another one. Here's one that says, a thesis here at the end of the introductory paragraph can really help the organizational structure of the entire paper. See this Writing Center podcast and this blog post, or this. What's wrong with this comment? Or how could it be improved? Yes, it's too much. It's just